So enough of me talking. I'm going to introduce you to our facilitators today, who are two of my favorite people and colleagues. We have Jessica Tong, pronouns she, they. Jessica is YRFN's Urban Agriculture Coordinator. She manages all 5 of our community gardens at YRFN, and she's the co-lead on the development of the Compost Learning Hub. And she does also wear many, many other hats in this organization. And we are so happy to have her here with us today. She'll be sharing with us the planting and harvesting portion of this workshop. Jess, you can give everyone a little wave. Co-facilitating with Jess today, we have Chef Maxine Knight, our resident chef at York Region Food Network. And she is also our culinary program director. If you have ever attended any of Maxine's classes in person or virtually, you'll understand why they're so popular. Maxine is full of energy and very passionate about food and connecting people. So Maxine will be sharing a little bit about the health properties and various ways to prepare garlic to get the most out of it with us today. So without further ado, and to let me stop talking, Jess and Maxine, I just want to thank you so much for putting this workshop together, and I'm going to pass the mic over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Marissa. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. But yes, thanks so much for joining us today, everyone. My name is Jess, pronouns she and they. Maxine, did you want to say hi?
Hey folks, good to see everybody. Are we ready for garlic? The benefit of doing garlic virtually though is that we're not going to breathe all over each other, but we get all the information. So I think that that's a plus, a win-win there.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, we did do a workshop in person a few years ago, which we have some pictures of, and that was really fun. I guess it's just as long as everyone participates equally and eats the garlic equally, then we're good. Awesome. Okay, so everyone's good and can see my screen. There's nothing covering this sort of corner here. Perfect. And yeah, again, feel free to let me know if I'm talking too quickly or too quietly or any other sort of access need. Maxine and I are happy to accommodate. But we'll be talking about everything garlic today. So I'll talk a little bit about growing garlic and harvesting garlic and, garlic in the garden. And Chef Maxine will be talking about garlic in the kitchen. So it should be a really good session. Let's see. I'm just going to make sure I can switch. There we go. So again, I'll start off talking about planting and harvesting garlic. And then there's something called garlic scapes that plays into all of that. And then we'll hand it over to Chef Maxine to talk a little bit about the health benefits and cooking with garlic. So one of the first things I want to talk to you guys about in terms of planting garlic is, where do you source your garlic? So what's the difference between the 3 things on this list here? So we've got seed garlic, and that's sort of what we commonly use to grow garlic. And what it is it's grown for seed stock on purpose. So it's the bulb that you take from, or the clove that you take from the bulb underground. And usually the cloves, we actually plant them in the fall, and then you get a full bulb the following season. So it's a 1-season thing. And then the cloves are actually genetic clones of the original plant. Now, some people will take grocery store garlic and plant those. I mean, it works. The only issue is that this garlic was grown for culinary use. So some of the issues that come up with that is they've been stored for a long time, so they actually aren't quite as healthy for starting as seed. Oftentimes they're imported from overseas, and there might be certain diseases or pests that follow along that aren't actually native to here, that we don't want to be introducing to our soil. So generally we recommend not to plant grocery store garlic, just eat them, use them in the kitchen, but look for organic seed growers or seed garlic growers that you can source from. And these, the last thing here is garlic bulbils. So what that is actually is it's a little sort of cluster of small bulbs that are at the end of the scape. And we'll talk about the scape in a little bit, but they're actually really tiny. And so if you plant those, you have to wait 2 to 3 seasons for those to actually mature into full bulbs that you can either eat or use to grow again. And the benefit to using these is that there are fewer soil-borne diseases because they're actually at the top of the plant. And they, you actually get a lot more of these as opposed to buying individual cloves. One plant, as you can see in this photo here, has so many, that you can actually divide. So again, with the grocery store garlic, they often are imported, so they might not be acclimated to our climate. And so if you can find a local grower who grows seed garlic, that stuff will be really happy where we are with our winters and our temperatures. And I went over storage time. Oftentimes it's transported for a long time, stored for a long time, and loses some viability. So it might not germinate very well for you. And then again, we don't want to be introducing those diseases from different, different growing places. So we'll talk a little bit about planting garlic. I have a video here of last year, or 2020, when we were planting some garlic in the fall. So let's see. So today we're going to be planting some garlic. So garlic is something that you typically want to plant in the fall. Starting end of September, October is the perfect time to be planting garlic. And November, certainly you can do that as long as the ground's not frozen. You want to generally give it at least maybe 1 to 2 weeks before the frost hits, before the ground gets frozen, so that the garlic can have a little bit of time to maybe set out those initial roots or get acclimatized to the soil and its surroundings before the winter really hits and before all the cold weather really makes the garlic go dormant. In the spring, this will give us a head start, since we've planted in the fall, for the garlic to come up as early as possible so that you can get some scapes in the early summer and some garlic in the later summer. What we've got right now is 11 different kinds of garlic, which is incredible. I love it. So it's different varieties from different countries or regions. And we get all our stuff from, shout out to Daniel from The Cutting Veg. We always get our stuff from him because he has so much variety. And we also know that it's locally grown, locally sourced. And so the garlic has been grown in an environment that it's more familiar with. And that's very similar to our climate. We're in the same region. So we know that the garlic will do well here. So we've got, again, 11 different varieties from different countries, all the way from, Tibetan, Sicilian, Russian, Polish, Korean, all sorts of really, really cool varieties. And they can differ somewhat between taste, the color, the sizing. Some of the skins will sort of wrap the bulbs more tightly, and it'll be a little bit more difficult to peel off when you're trying to cook with them. And some of them will be easy to peel off. You can also have a smell and see if there's any differences in smells between the different garlics. yeah, lots of fun comparisons. I encourage you to plant different varieties and just try it out for yourself. See which ones work best for you. Different varieties can also have different properties against diseases or pests, or they might do well in certain climates. But I'll show you, for example, here we've got some Tibetan garlic, and they're beautiful. They're just these wee little bulbs, beautiful red color, okay? And I'll show you compared to Polish garlic, which is one of my favorites. But take a look at this. So that's a Polish bulb, okay? Huge bulbs, very flavorful, and they're just beautiful to grow. So let's compare it. See that size difference? That's incredible. There you go. So many different varieties out there, so many different ways to compare them and just appreciate what we're growing. When we're actually getting the garlic ready, we'll take the bulb and we'll just split it apart. Okay, these ones are already pre-split, but essentially what we want to do is keep the skin on. Okay, you can see there's still all of that skin. We'll keep the skins on the bulbs, but we'll just separate them so that we can plant each one individually. So another question that I get regularly is, what's up and what's down? So we generally want to plant the garlic with this flat part here down, facing down, because that's where all the roots are going to come out of. And then the pointy part up, that's where the stem's going to actually start coming out of. Okay, so that's one thing. We generally try and have the top of the garlic about 1 inch to 2 inches below the surface level of the soil, and then we'll cover that up with soil. And it's often good to put straw or mulch. Sometimes I'll put some dried leaves on there, just to give it sort of a winter blanket to keep it overwintering comfortably. They generally like to be planted maybe 4 to 6 inches apart from each other in a row, and then for row spacing, about 1 foot between each row. All right, so we've got the bulbs into the ground. Now all we have left to do is cover the bulbs with soil. So we do want to just give it a firm pat, and that way there's good contact with the soil for all of the bulbs. Okay, let's get to it. Alrighty. So just a little summary for everyone. Again, we want to plant in the fall. So right now we're entering the perfect time to plant our garlic. So September to November, but make sure it's before your first frost. We don't want the garlic bulbs to get damaged before they can establish themselves. I recommend planting in the ground. They don't do quite as well in pots and containers. They do, need a lot of insulation over the winter. Certainly you can try. And then in terms of spacing, again, top of garlic, maybe 1 to 2 inches below the surface. Sometimes the cloves really do vary in size. So some people will say like 2 to 3 times the size of the clove. That's how deep you want to plant them. And then in terms of seed spacing, 4 to 6 inches apart, and then row spacing, maybe 10 to 12 inches apart. And then one key thing is to make sure we overwinter them with some mulch. And that could be straw. I've used dried leaves before, although those do get kind of packed down a bit. But generally I would put about 4 to 6 inches thick of this mulch. And that just helps it to, protect it a little bit from the harsh, cold in the winter. So I would put this on in November. I wouldn't put it too early because that can actually sort of keep the moisture a bit too wet. and it could actually start to rot the garlic too early, as opposed to letting it establish. You can take it off in the spring, or you can leave it on. Just make sure that the garlic can actually poke through. So if you've got really, really heavy matted parts, just sort of disperse that a little bit in the spring. And then let's talk a little bit about garlic scapes. So what are garlic scapes? Essentially, you'll see usually in mid-June, this sort of thick stem. It's one middle stem that comes out. And then you'll see in this picture here, this is actually the start of, I guess, what we call a flower. It's not a true flower, but eventually this will open up into the bulbils that you saw in an earlier slide. And so this stem will create those bulbils. The energy will go into that. And so what we want to do actually is to remove that so that the energy stays in the bulbs underground. So you'll see here in this video, so that's just me snapping off the scapes mid-June. And the lucky thing is that scapes are delicious and we can actually cook with them. So it's a win-win, right? We get to create healthy garlic and we also get to use this awesome thing in the kitchen. And so again, why do we do this? It concentrates that energy into the bulb. You can see here in this video, that's a scape that was never pulled. And so you get sort of that formation at the top, and the garlic at the bottom stayed relatively small, which isn't what we really want. So I just wanted to pass it off to Chef Maxine real quick, and just to chat about scapes in the kitchen and what we can do with them.
Hey all. Okay, yeah, so scapes in the kitchen. So if you have come to any of our workshops before, you may have seen that I've done a garlic scape workshop for like the past 3 years. I don't think we did one this year, but that was just because of COVID. But anyway, so who has cooked? You can just like raise your hand. Who has cooked with garlic scapes? All right, so there's a few. Hold on a second. I just need to, oh, there we go. I see you guys now. Yeah, so garlic scapes are super tasty. And when you cook them, they kind of taste like a cross between a garlicky green bean or like asparagus. So sort of garlicky asparagus. Super, super tasty. You can use it raw. So in its raw form, you can sort of chop it up into smaller pieces and then just, you know, cook it, add it to your eggs or add it to anything you're cooking. The more you cook it though, the sweeter the flavor becomes. So if you do want like a pungent, more garlicky flavor, you want to add it, you can add it at the end of a cooking process and then you'll get more of the garlicky flavor. If you want the garlicky flavor without sort of the pungency behind it, then you can add it as you're cooking and it adds like a sort of sweet garlicky flavor. So it really does like change as the cooking process goes. And so it's really cool to cook with. One of our most popular recipes, which I'm going to share with everyone if you don't have it, is our garlic scape tempura. And it is brilliant. So super tasty, really, really yummy. It gets crispy. And then, like I said, it's like a garlicky green bean or asparagus. And the garlic scape tempura is spectacular. So I'll share that recipe with you all. And then there's also really nice, like you can just stir fry it. Oftentimes in some cultures, it's just used like as another stir fry vegetable that gets added into your saute. So lots of really cool things you can do with it. And what I always say with any ingredient is just explore with it. So get your hands on a little bit. You can always hit us up in the spring or sorry, in the early summer, because we usually have more than enough. And then you can just give it a try.
Maxine, I haven't tried this famous scape tempura, so I'm definitely gonna need that recipe from you. I know.
What?
I know. I haven't tried it.
Where have you been? Oh man. All right, Jess, I have to hook you up. So, but you might have to wait till next year because I don't think we have any more whole garlic scapes.
I'll be waiting. No worries.
I see some people just kind of asking like how can you use it? You can definitely use it raw in a salad. Again, you can cut, I prefer to cut it like a little bit thinner. It's really pungent when it's uncooked. So just nice thin slices adds like a really nice boost of flavor. Or in something like tabbouleh would be delicious. And again, you'd have to play around with how much you use depending on the recipe, just because it's like not quite garlic, it's a little bit different. So you have to see how much you need to actually implement into a dish. But 100%, if you're making like hummuses or spreads or anything that needs raw garlic, it adds such a beautiful flavor. And those little cloves on the top that Jess was talking about, like before it starts to flour, if you take those out, you can actually just consume them like that. They're very strong, but they're really good for your gut health. And we'll get back to that later when we're talking about like more the culinary aspect of it. But it's great for your gut. So you can always like harvest them, leave them in a little bit of oil, and then just like eat them. They're small enough that you can take a couple bites and swallow, or you can even just swallow it on its own.
So these little parts here, right, Maxine?
Yeah.
Ah, cool. Very cool.
Once the bigger they get, like the bigger the cloves are, and then the bigger the cloves are, the more they're more beneficial. And a lot of energy and a lot of nutrients are found in those cloves. Because if you think about it, at some point it's gonna grow. It's gonna grow like a plant, right? So all the energy and the health benefits would be in there.
Neat. Awesome. Thank you, Maxine. I know like pesto is a pretty popular way to use it as well, right? Yeah, there's so many different ways.
Yeah, there's great garlic scape pestos. You know what? You can pickle them, which is really, really great. I got a gift of garlic scape vinegar, which is really nice. The vinegar is just, oh, I'll go grab it in a minute. But the vinegar was just kind of steeped in the garlic scape was steeped in the vinegar. So it adds this absolutely beautiful garlicky flavor. And it's absolutely beautiful. So you can use it in so many different ways. We made our own garlic salt. So just pulsing the garlic scapes with some coarse salt, and then laying it out on like a baking tray and putting it in the oven until it dries. So just on like how you would dehydrate things. So just at 180 degrees or so, or even less. If you have a pilot light, if you have a gas stove, you can just turn it on. You leave that tray in there. And once the moisture evaporates, you break it up, dry it again. And then once it's completely dry, because you don't want it to mold on you after you've gone through that effort of doing the salt. And then you can just pulse it in your food processor. And now you have this beautiful garlic salt that you've made yourself.
That sounds amazing. And I would love to see that vinegar as well.
Yeah, I'll go grab it actually, so y'all can see it. Well, just I'll let you continue, and then we'll hop back into our kitchen applications in a minute.
Sounds good. Awesome. All right. So one thing that I wanted to talk about is hardneck versus softneck garlic. So I don't know if you guys have heard of much about that, but we're talking about the Scape, and essentially a hardneck variety or hardneck type of garlic has that Scape that grows out of it, as opposed to a softneck that doesn't have the Scape. And, there are different considerations for, choosing which ones to plant and also choosing which ones to cook with. In terms of planting, for hardneck, it is actually quite winter hardy. So it's a little bit better for our growing condition with our sort of longer winters. And a lot of people find that hardneck varieties are more flavorful. Chef Maxine, maybe you could talk about that a little bit. I don't know if you've noticed that, but the hardneck actually has larger bulbs and more consistent sizing of it, but there are fewer of them fewer cloves within the bulb. And then the hardneck actually doesn't store quite as long as the softneck, but it's still a good 4 to 6 months that you can store them. So as long as you are eating within that time, you're good. And then you can see here, this is the soft neck. So usually with the hard neck, where my mouse is, there's this sort of stem part, and you can see it in that cross section. But in this picture here, there isn't one because this one's the soft neck. So you can see the inconsistency in sizing and how many there actually are in here. Again, they grow better in warmer climates. They do store actually very well. And usually if people are braiding garlic, the soft neck variety is best for that, just because it, yeah, it's just way easier to work with it. In terms of harvesting our garlic, you know, when do we know to harvest the garlic? So usually this is happening July and maybe early August. And something to note is that each of the leaves on here, that represents one layer on the bulb. So you can see when you harvest it, it's this continual piece that goes and then eventually wraps around the garlic. So based on that, we want to make sure there are, you know, plenty of leaves that we can see, and that means that the garlic is developing well. And we want to see if there's about 2 to 3 sets of the bottom leaves that are starting to turn yellow and brown and drying out. That's when we know it's a good time to start harvesting. So we do want to keep some green leaves on top, because if the whole plant starts to die before we harvest, that means the layers are actually starting to deteriorate, and we don't want that. So these are a good example of when to harvest. And then curing. So essentially what we're doing is trying to make sure that the garlic goes through a process so that it's set up to store for the longest time possible. And so the first thing I would say is don't wash or clean your garlic if you're planning to store it, because that layer of dirt and soil actually really helps to preserve the garlic. And definitely keep the stems on as you're curing. And you can take it off once you're done curing it, but the stems still have, you know, some nutrients and some stuff that can go into the garlic. And it also helps to just prevent diseases from getting into the garlic. So what I would do is for the first 7 to 10 days, if you can layer it, you know, in a single layer horizontally in a dry and shaded area, just to let it sort of have good airflow. You can turn them every once in a while to make sure that there's drying all around the bulbs. And then when that's done, you can bundle them with the stems up and the bulbs down. You can bundle it about 6 to 12 bulbs together, as you can see in that top picture, and just hang it for 3 to 6 weeks, and make sure it's a well-ventilated area. So if it's not, make sure you get a fan going and just sort of running so that there's air circulation. And I would say maybe 13 to 14 degrees Celsius is a pretty ideal temperature to keep them at, and make sure they're out of the sunlight. And then when that's all done, you can trim the dried roots. Okay, just make sure you don't actually get right to the bulb, because that can actually hurt the bulb and introduce diseases. And then you can cut the stems down to about 1 inch, and then you're good to store that garlic for quite a while before you use it in the kitchen. So now we'll go over to Chef Maxine to talk a bit about cooking with garlic, but I just want to show you guys this awesome workshop that we had done, about 3 years ago, I think, prior to COVID. And we were in the garden, and this is the garlic that was grown in the garden. And you can see this one's like from Salt Spring, BC. This one's a Polish one. We've got a Russian one, and it was a really fun workshop. So Chef Maxine was able to, roast a bunch of the garlic and just talk a little bit about the different varieties and how we use it. So you're going to get a little bit of information about that right now. So Maxine, over to you.
Thanks, Jess. All right. So everyone, okay, so garlic. It's just like it, so it plays many different roles, right? So garlic plays a bunch of different roles. So it's actually really good for your health. It's good for gut health, and it actually helps with many other like conditions like inflammation, diabetes, yeah, just any sort of like digestive issues. It works with it. So it works to help improve it, right? So fresh garlic, especially when it's raw, there's an active compound in it called alanine. So there is, like in the garlic, there's annin. And then when you cut it, it releases the enzyme alanase. And so the alanase and the alanine, when they interact together, you get alanine. And so that compound is what gives garlic its like medicinal properties. So really cool. And so it's like you can be taking your medicine just from eating your food. And you can do that in so many ways. You can just incorporate garlic in most of the things that you make. What's great about it is it just tastes good and it adds so much oomph and enthusiasm to your food. Oftentimes, if I'm finding that something tastes bland, you add a little bit of garlic and it picks it up, right? Without having to do a whole lot. If you were part of our, we have this program called Lunch Table, and we did a lunch table and we just talked about flavor. And we just talked about like how flavors interact with each other and like all different things that you can do. And garlic was most people's go-to for just adding energy and like vibrancy into any dish. So love it for that reason. All right, as an aside here's the garlic scape vinegar that I had been talking about. And so inside, it was just steeped. What's steeped in here is some sage, the garlic scapes. I think it's just sage and garlic scapes actually. This was a gift that someone had made, but it's really delicious. This is my second one that I'm sort of going through. It just adds like a warmth. The garlic scapes are really tasty, and then it adds a warmth of fall with the sage flavor. And so we can use, you can use this like in your cooking preparations. It's delicious on like Brussels sprouts or roasted vegetables, roasted root vegetables and squash. You can just drizzle a little bit on there and it just adds some vibrancy. So I really enjoyed that. I think I might have missed the question. Question was, would the scapes blanch first? I mean, I would say yes. Generally speaking, like if you're going to be adding it to something like this, just like a quick blanch and then into the vinegar. Okay, so let's talk about the role of garlic in food. So garlic has like a number of different roles. It can be an emulsifier. So if you're making a salad dressing or like a salad dressing or a sauce, and you want to thicken it up, you don't want the acids and the oils to be separated, you want it to come together, you can add a little bit of fresh minced garlic and that'll help hold it together. So it emulsifies. One of like the most popular emulsifier is like mayonnaise. So mayonnaise, you have the egg yolk, which acts as an emulsifier, and you also often have garlic as well, like a garlic aioli, and that makes it rich and creamy, and it helps to hold the oil and the acids together. So it acts as an emulsifier. It adds heat, so it balances acidity. So if you have something, if you're cooking something and it's like really tart and acidic, if you add a little bit of heat to your food, it helps to balance that out. So garlic is a really flavorful way to add that heat. So you can just mince up a few pieces of garlic and throw it in, and it helps to balance that out. You can use, like, it could be any source of heat. So it could be like pepper or hot sauce or something spicy, but because garlic does have like that pungent flavor to it, it also works really nicely in, as far as like balancing like acidity. Okay, so that works really quite well. And of course, flavor. It just adds great flavor. If you've put a whole bunch of things into your dish, if you use all kinds of spices and then you're tasting it and you're like, So there's a few go-tos you can use. So if you know, I put all the spices in there, I put my onions in there, I put all kinds of love in there, and it's still not kind of coming out where it's like really flavorful. A couple things you can add is you can add an acid, right? So you can put something acidic in there and it'll help bring out the flavor, makes it more fresh and awake. You can add salt, but some of us are really trying to watch how much salt we actually consume. Or you can add garlic. So when you put a whole bunch of stuff in your dish, it's just a little bit of bland, and you need the flavors to come through. You don't really need to add more, but you want the flavors to come out. Try adding some garlic in there, and you'll see that it'll really help. All right. So on that note, I'm going to show you there's different ways you can coax flavor out of your garlic. Did we know this? I don't know. So I have two variations. Jessica talked about like the soft neck, and literally the neck is soft, and the hard neck, right? So those garlic scapes would have came off of these guys. And so just looking at them, I'll show you here. So just looking at them, so this is our hard neck variety, and this is our soft neck variety. And just looking at them, you can see that it is a smaller clove, but there's, what did we have? We have 4 large, very large cloves in this one. And then we have multiple very small or smaller cloves in this one, right? So there's a few ways that you can coax the flavor out of your garlic, depending on what you want to do. So I'm going to show you a few of those ways. Depending on the way you prepare it is going to be what kind of flavor you're going to get from your garlic. Okay, so I'll show you what to do. So first up, here's our clove, and we want to peel it. Okay, so, we break it apart, and we're going to take, we have a piece here, and sometimes it's like really challenging to kind of peel off the skin. So I have a couple of ways that I like to get the garlic out of the skin, and I'll just show you. I have a cutting board here. I'll show you the cutting board. The one thing I like to do is I use my knife, I put it on there and I tap it. Once I tap it, it loosens the skin, and then it just really simply peels off the garlic. So depending on how hard you hit it, that's how much, like it might get more smashed, but you can have it like this. If you just tap it lightly, you won't damage the bulb, and then you can decide how you want to process it after that. Another way, which is kind of fun. This is a good way to get the kids involved in the kitchen. I like to use a mason jar. And I actually learned this trick from one of our participants. I don't remember exactly who it was, but I know one of our participants had showed me this trick, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. So you just take your cloves and you just separate them, and you pop them into the jar like that, and then close it up, and then just shake it. A little bit more. Once you shake it and then you take it out, so the garlic starts to loosen from the skin, and then you can pull it out. So really easy, it just comes off. And now we have like our cloves of garlic. I think that that's pretty fun. So it's a really good way. It's a good way to get the kids involved in the kitchen, because you can just give them the mason jar and then have them just shake it, and it's fun for them, and you get your garlic peeled. All right, so now I just want to go over like different preparation methods. So depending on what you want to do, the way that you slice or mince or whatever your garlic is really going to affect the flavor. Okay, so first I'm going to show you mincing. So if you want to get the most garlic flavor into your dish, you're going to mince the garlic. And so that's just cutting it up really small. So to do that, I create some slices, and then I make a pile, and then I'm just going to run my knife across it over and over and over again until the garlic is nice and soft. Now, this is how I mince my garlic, but you can really do it any way that you're comfortable. what I wouldn't recommend is a garlic press. So I'm not a fan of the garlic press because once you're done, a lot of those oils, which is the active compound that we talked about, the alanine, a lot of that is left in the actual press. So that's why I don't like it. I want those active properties to be in my food. And a lot of that is the flavor as well. So I want that flavor in my food. So for me, I prefer just to use my knife and to chop it up. So here's a minced garlic. So when you mince your garlic really small, you're gonna get the maximum flavor is released. If you use this at the beginning of your cooking process, it's gonna really mellow out as you cook. If you add it at the end, when it's almost finished, you're gonna get a stronger garlic flavor. If anyone has any questions as I'm talking, please feel free just to interrupt and to let me know. If Jess or Marissa can just read out any questions if there's any, that'll be great. All right, so the other way you can use your garlic, so you can mince it, or you can just slice it. Nice thin slices of garlic in your dish, because you actually, maybe you want to taste the garlic, but you don't want it too pungent in your mouth. Slices like this, if it's cooked for a longer period of time, you get like a sweeter flavor from the garlic because the whole surface area kind of gets caramelized in the pot or whatever you're doing. And so you get like nice, thin, kind of crispy and like a slightly sweeter flavor from the garlic, which is really nice. So sometimes I use this method depending on what I want to do. And if I want pieces of garlic in my food. Another way that you can do it is like rough chopping it. So instead of it being really fine like this, you can rough chop. So I do my same slices, but I'm not going to be taking too much time to make sure that it's really small. I'm going to have bigger pieces of garlic like that. And then this will get added to the dish. So when I have it rough chopped like this, you're definitely going to get like a stronger garlic flavor. You're going to actually taste it like in your mouth, like when you bite it, because there's like these big chunks. So again, like just depending on what you want to achieve, like you'll get different flavors based on how it's sliced like this.
Maxine,
yes.
We do have somebody asking, after all that chopping, how do you get that garlic smell off your hands when you're
Good question. Lemon juice works. So I just like, you wash it with your soap, and then sometimes I squeeze a little bit of lemon juice. Sometimes I just let it go. Because if you're cooking all the time, you kind of get used to things on your hands, but lemon juice works as far as like getting off the smell. And then just the more you wash your hands, it'll like lessen as it goes.
We also have a couple other questions, but I did want to also mention that coffee grounds with a little bit of like oil or coconut oil, or even just coffee grounds, if you scrub your hands in them and then rinse them, also helps with that smell.
Oh, I love this. I love the 360 learning. Thank you for that.
Right? We also have a question that says, when should I prepare garlic? I mean, 15 minutes before cooking, or I'm not sure. It says, or short her to get more nutrition. So I think it's for the nutritional value. What's the best time to cook it?
Yeah. Well, I would definitely recommend, that's a great question, by the way. I would definitely recommend, I chop my garlic before I cook it. So if I'm preparing all my veggies and I'm getting everything ready, then I'll chop the garlic last. So I might do my vegetables, and then I'll do my onion, and then I'll do the garlic last, because that's going into the pot sooner. So once it gets exposed to air, like the oxygen interacts with any of the compounds, just like anything, how it oxidizes apples and potatoes. Like once the oxygen gets in contact with the compounds, it starts to like lessen, of course. So definitely what I would recommend is just you cut it last. So the last thing that you're going to do before you start actually getting in there and start cooking. So that's what I would recommend. Were there any other questions?
No, there was one more comment that says rubbing your hands on your metal sink will instantly take the smell away from the garlic cutting.
Okay, so Deborah, I'm on that, right? Like next, I'm going to give that a try and see how effective that is. That's really cool. So I love that everybody always has like some really great tips and everything to help us all like do our learning. All right, so I'm just going to take a couple more minutes to show you the other things that I prepared with garlic. So right here, I did some confit garlic. And so this is a good way to preserve your garlic and have really good flavor. So this is a whole clove. I like using whole cloves. And so this is a way that you can do that. The whole clove was just gently simmered, like not boiling or anything, in some oil. So you're just gonna cover the garlic. So you put your cloves in the pot, you just cover it with oil, and then you just let it simmer. You don't want boiling or sizzling or anything like that, just like a light simmer, and until the cloves are soft. Once the cloves are soft, you can transfer it into a jar or a container like I did. If you want, you can add a pinch of salt in there. But then now you have this really delicious, flavorful garlic oil, and you have these garlic cloves, which because they've been cooked this way, they're soft. I'll show you what they're like. They're really soft. The garlic becomes, again, it becomes sweeter. I'm gonna mash it so you can see. Here's my clove. And it just like breaks apart. So it's really soft. And you can actually eat it like this. You can just spread it on toast or eat it like this. You can add it into salads or dressings. If you've done roasted vegetables, you can cut some of that up and add it in there. So really, really nice. Awesome flavor when you do it that way. And this keeps, so you can pop this in your fridge. And then whenever you want any of the garlic oil, just maybe for a salad dressing or just to sprinkle on your food at the end, or if you want that garlic, nice sweet taste, you can totally pull it out and just use it in anything that you're making. And here's my last preparation that I did today. So here it's in a foil. So what I did here is my garlic was in a foil. I cut just the top off, not too much of the cloves because I want to keep as much of the bulb as I can. And I just drizzled a little bit of olive oil on the top. And as you saw, I wrapped it in some tin foil. So this went into my oven and I let it roast for probably 30 minutes until all the cloves were nice and soft. And same thing, just like with the confit, you can see I just squeeze it and the clove comes right out and you can see it's like almost buttery, right? So it's really soft, smells amazing. This is like roasted garlic, that's confit garlic, and you can taste it. And it's really good. You can use that in anything. Throw it in your mashed potatoes, any different preparation, you can use it. And the best way to know when to use what is just try it different times when you're making something. So if you go ahead and you roast your garlic like we did here, I don't know, what do you want to try it on? Do you want to put it in your mashed potatoes? Do you want to add it with your meat? Do you want to mix it with some fresh herbs and use it as a spread? Like whatever. So just give them a try, cut them the different ways, and then you can see how it interacts with your dish as you go. So that would be my suggestion there.
Amazing. Amazing. Was that your last preparation?
That was my last preparation. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to like shoot about how to cook them or any like properties or anything that you want to know about. Love to answer those questions.
Okay, we do have some questions a little bit, if we backtrack a little bit to when Jess was talking about planting. So maybe I'll just start there. Jess, we have a question that says, do we have to plant the bulbs in the same season? If not, how long can they last?
So sorry, I was just reading that. Is it the bulbs or the bulbils? Do we have to? I think it was the bulbils.
Oh, the bulbils. So, yes.
Sorry. Yeah. So I've heard of people planting that either in the spring or in the fall. So like I think in the fall, you can definitely plant them. The only thing is that they're a bit more susceptible to like damage from the winter. So I've heard of people planting them in actually like containers, like Rubbermaid containers or something like that, so that you can kind of at least keep track of them. And they kind of put them in the garage so that they still get that like winter, like we call it vernalization. So they know that it's, been a winter season, and then they know to come up in the spring. And then you can also store them until the spring and plant them then. And then that way you have less of a chance of the stuff, getting damaged over the winter. But for that, because they need that sort of kickstart with the vernalization, I would actually put them in the fridge for about a week or two, right before you're going to put them in the ground. And then that way they know that it's time to go after that. So, yeah.
So would you would break up the bulbils and like store them in like a Ziploc or in something like that?
Yeah, exactly. I think like a breathable bag, so you don't have to completely seal them. But yeah, don't freeze them. Just put them in the fridge so that it mimics the winter.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay. And then Susanna asked, when you say 1 to 2 inches below the surface, when you're planting the actual bulbs, is that 2 inches from the bottom of the bulb or the top of the bulb?
From the top. Yeah. Just from the pointy end.
Okay, perfect. Deborah was asking, do any garden pests eat the bulbs once you've planted them?
Yeah, there's definitely some pests out there. In terms of the bulbs, nematodes are the most common ones. So they're just these little tiny, almost like worm-like things in the soil. And they often will attack like roots, like root vegetables and the stems right at the bottom. And so what I would say for that is, if you're trying to prevent that from happening, you can plant bulbils, so that those they don't sort of bring the nematodes with them because they're above ground. Or if you don't want to do that, I would say like crop rotation. So making sure that you're not planting in the exact same soil and exact same location as the year before. And if you can, sort of rotate it so that it's 3 years before you go back to the same spot. Another thing to do would be to remove any debris. So just try not to leave the stuff laying in there. Just take it away, compost it, whatever, or, put it to the side, but don't leave it so that the nematodes will sort of attract to that location. There are also obviously other pests, like I've had issues with like leek moth. And actually, I have a photo that I can show you guys. Maybe I'll do that. Yeah, so this actually is a photo of damage from a leek moth, or like the leaf miner. And so what they'd like to do is just sort of chew their way into the leaves or the scape, and then they'll sort of burrow in. And mostly they work on the leaves, but sometimes they'll go all the way to the bulb, which is annoying. And so again, if you can do a bit of like crop rotation just so that, and clear out that debris, then it'll really help to keep them from overwintering year after year.
Okay, and that's excellent information. As for some of us that are new gardeners or new to planting garlic, are those pests less likely to be in the soil if there has been no garlic planted there before?
Yeah, definitely. And then also, again, another reason to buy seed garlic as opposed to using the stuff from the grocery store, because the seed garlic, they're actually grown so that there will be disease resistance, so that it's, a clean environment, as opposed to the grocery store stuff. They might not care quite as much about that. What they want is just production, right? And yeah, it doesn't matter if there's you know, stuff overwintering, because we're gonna eat the garlic instead of plant it.
Okay, so Jung says, prior to planting garlic, what kind of veggies can I grow? Maybe in the same soil, is that what we're asking? And also, can I continually grow garlic in the same spot? So I think that you've covered that one. But this is their second year growing.
Yeah, so prior to planting garlic, certainly you can, you know, like just take a look at the things like days to maturity of different vegetables. And as long as it's something that can be harvested prior to maybe September, you're pretty good. So even if it's like leafy greens that are quick to harvest, radishes, you know, just anything, broccoli, like your brassicas, that kind of thing. And then in the spot where you harvested garlic, you can probably plant quick things afterwards that will still be able to produce in the fall. So again, your leafy greens and all that.
And I think this is a second part to that. It just said that their friends say garlic requires a lot of nutrition, and they're thinking to add green compost only, but not sure if it's enough or not.
Jung, could you clarify actually, when you're talking about green compost, are you talking about like just stuff that's created out of like
Food scraps?
yeah, like your food scraps, as opposed to like fully developed compost? As you answer, I mean, certainly like it's good to add compost prior to planting your garlic. So do add, you know, a little bit when you're preparing your bed. Fish emulsion, fertilizer. You know what? I'm actually not too familiar with that, so I'm not too sure. In terms of weeds for the compost, just make sure that there's no seed heads in there. Veggie roots are good, but what I would do is actually break that stuff down into like good finished compost. And then that way you're not, you know, if the vegetables are trying to break down while you've got garlic beside it, there can be mold issues, there can be pest issues. So just try and break it down into finished compost first. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm just taking a quick look through the rest of the chat here. Susanna is saying, Chef Maxine, that she's very excited to try the garlic salt. So Maxine is going to send us the recipes that she was talking about in regards to the garlic, which we will send out in a follow-up email shortly. And it will also have a repeat or a replay of the workshop that we are doing right now. So if you wanted to revisit it, you will be able to. I think there's another question just came up. Okay, what does it say? Jung says, I do not do weeding so much, so keep them after weeding to dry up and then plant to mix it into the soil. Oh, that's with the roots and the weeds. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, I think that's it for the questions. If I'm missing anything, or please just raise your hand. Oh, we have, how do you store the garlic confit? That's for Chef Maxine.
Hey, yeah, so it stores really well because it's actually in the fat. Like the fat is actually the preserving method. So you can just store it in the fridge. So I have mine, like I showed you all, in just like a mason jar here. So I just will put the lid on, and then I can just leave this in the fridge. So I use an olive oil, so it will like partially solidify because it's olive oil. But what you can do is just pull it out of the fridge, let it warm up to room temperature, and then you can scoop out the cloves. Or you can just even scoop out what you want out of there and then just leave that aside in another container, and then it'll warm up perfectly. And then you can just use it as you like.
Thank you, Maxine. That's awesome. I'm actually really excited to try that myself because I never even thought of doing that before, but it's so brilliant. It's like easy and brilliant and it adds so much flavor to everything. So I'm excited.
Exactly. I'm all about easy. So that is definitely a good go-to easy one.
Yeah, love it. There was one other comment that our participant Susanna had mentioned. It doesn't actually have to do with garlic, but it was inspired from what you were saying about making the garlic salt and drying it out, Maxine. And that was that right now there's such an abundance of tomatoes and there's lots of people that are processing and dealing with tomatoes right now. And something that they've learned was that skin can be dried from the tomatoes in that same type of way that you were talking about, drying out the salt in the oven and then powdered into a seasoning. And then that seasoning can be used when paste is required in recipes. So I just thought that was awesome information that was inspired by what you were saying to share with everyone. So I just wanted to say thanks to Susanna for sharing that. Because yes, it is tomato season. It is tomato season. Yeah, please add to that.
Yeah, so that's actually brilliant. So a couple things you can do for preserving your tomatoes if you're not like a canning kind of person. But what you can do is take off the skin so you can blanch the tomatoes first and then peel off the skin. So blanching, just make a little score, like an X on the bottom of the tomato, remove the core, and then plunge it into some boiling water for like 5 to 10 seconds and then in ice water. You might have to, depending on how many tomatoes you put, you might have to leave it for a little bit longer. Once you plunge it in the ice water, the tomatoes now, the skin will still peel off. It'll just peel off, but the tomatoes are still uncooked. And then you can cut the tomatoes in 4, remove the seeds, and then dry the actual tomatoes in the oven. So you can dry the tomatoes. You can leave the skin on too and dry it if you wanted to. But if you did want to do what Susanna was suggesting, remove the skin, dry the actual tomato petals, and you can put that in oil and that'll just preserve, leave it in your fridge. And then you can use these beautiful oven dried tomatoes in anything you're making. And then as Susanna was saying with the skin, you can dry the skin and use that again as seasoning. So just tons of ways that we can preserve our food.
Sorry, that's so wonderful and so exciting. And yeah, Jung says that I freeze whole tomato and use during the winter. Also easy and awesome. I know that we have run past our time and we usually do 1 to 2 o'clock, and we thank everybody so much for sticking with us. And we're really excited about our winter lineup of workshops coming up. There's going to be many in regards to compost, gardening, and also we're going to be doing some zero waste kind of cooking or baking. So please take a moment, if you can, sign up to the email list, and we will make sure that you get all of the information about the upcoming workshops and the Compost Learning Hub. I really wanted just to say again, thank you so much to Jess and Maxine for showing up and putting this all together. So much awesome information. And everybody, thank you for taking time out of your day for joining us in this workshop.